Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Throughout the entire Harry Potter story, the Golden Trio repeatedly broke school rules, sometimes for personal gain, sometimes to save their friends, and occasionally to save the entire wizarding world. Today, let's recall the most notable misdeeds of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, each of which, frankly, could have easily resulted in their expulsion from Hogwarts. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Arriving at Hogwarts in a flying car. Left without Hermione, Harry and Ron always managed to come up with the most unbelievable plans. When the entrance to platform 934 suddenly closed, the boys decided that the best solution was to steal Mr. Weasley's enchanted Ford Anglia and fly it to school. As a result, they not only violated the statute of secrecy by revealing themselves to dozens of muggles, but also damaged the Whomping Willow, and once again, no expulsion. Number 2. Using the Marauder map for secret trips to Hogsmeade. In his 3rd year, Harry desperately wanted to visit Hogsmeade, but the Dursleys refused to sign his permission slip. The result? Breaking the rules and the first serious use of the Marauder's map, which allowed him to sneak into the village unnoticed. Technically, this should have led to a severe reprimand, but Harry got away with it. Number 3. Late-night adventures under the invisibility cloak. Night walks became the Golden Trio's trademark style. Hidden under the invisibility cloak, they wandered Hogwarts corridors countless times, sneaked into the restricted section of the library, or visited Hagrid. Hagrid repeatedly asked them not to risk it, yet he was always glad to see them. Naturally, this only encouraged the teenagers to commit more rule-breaking. Number 4. Smuggling out Norbert the Dragon. Hagrid's love for dangerous magical creatures once led to a baby dragon, Norbert, appearing in his hut. When the dragon grew and bit Ron badly enough to send him to the hospital wing, Harry and Hermione helped organize a secret operation to transport Norbert to Hogwarts Tower, where they handed him over to Charlie Weasley as his friends. Smuggling a dragon is an offense that could have landed both the students and the groundskeeper in serious trouble. Number 5. Entering the Forbidden Forest. In their 2nd year, the friends were trying to uncover the truth about the Chamber of Secrets. Clues were scarce. Suspicions pointed toward Hagrid, but Harry and Ron decided to investigate themselves. Their search for answers brought them into the Forbidden Forest, where they encountered Aragog and nearly died. And once again, a serious violation, conveniently overlooked by the teachers. Number 6. Creating Dumbledore's army. When Dolores Umbridge banned practical magic and imposed dozens of absurd rules, Hermione suggested forming a secret resistance group, Dumbledore's army. This was a direct violation of the educational decree prohibiting any student gatherings without the Inquisitorial Squad's approval. Yes, the rule was made by Umbridge, but the offence was still severe. The army lasted for several months. It's surprising no one was expelled. 7. Stealing Thestrals for a flight to the Ministry. When Harry saw the vision of Sirius in danger, he became certain his godfather needed help. Luna suggested using Thestrals since they could easily find the way. In the end, 6 students simply borrowed the magical creatures and left the school grounds without permission, and again, no consequences whatsoever. Number 8. Attacking Professor Snape. Despite being a brilliant potions master and a loyal member of the Order of the Phoenix, Snape's relationship with the Golden Trio was complicated. In one instance, Harry, Ron, and Hermione simultaneously cast Expelliarmus, and the combined force of their spells knocked Snape unconscious for several hours. Attacking a teacher is a major offense, yet this too was forgiven. Number 9, Polyjuice Potion and illegal shape-shifting. Brewing Polyjuice Potion is extremely advanced and not included in the school curriculum. To make it, the trio had to trick Lockhart, break into the restricted section of the library, steal ingredients from Snape, and then use the potion to infiltrate the Slytherin common room. Any one of these steps could have led to expulsion, all of them together, definitely. And yet, as always, they got away with it. Number 10, breaking into the chamber of the Philosopher's Stone. At the start of the year, Dumbledore strictly forbade anyone from going near the third-floor corridor. But after learning about a possible threat from Voldemort, Harry, Ron, and Hermione deliberately disobeyed the order and secretly entered the area, overcoming magical obstacles protecting the stone. Their motives were noble, but the fact remains it was a blatant violation of school rules. Number 11, using the time turner to save Sirius and Buckbeak. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione's time turner was initially given to her for the innocent purpose of attending extra lessons. But when Harry and Hermione discovered that Sirius Black was about to be executed without trial, the rules flew out the window. Dumbledore, with a knowing smile, had only said, "Some do have the means to turn time back." The meaning was clear. Harry and Hermione decided to act, using the time turner to travel back and alter the course of events. Their mission was simple: save Sirius and Buckbeak and stop an unjust execution. The risks were enormous. Time travel was forbidden by the Ministry, and meddling with time was one of the most dangerous forms of magic. Harry and Hermione broke every rule in the book. "We've got to make it quick," Harry whispered, as they hid behind the rocks, watching their past selves move toward the tower. The act of saving Sirius was noble, but the consequences of tampering with time could have been catastrophic. Yet despite the law-breaking, nothing happened. No Ministry punishment, no school reprimands, just the echo of a brave act gone unnoticed by the very authorities that should have intervened. Number 12, spying on Malfoy with forbidden magic. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry, Potterhead's suspicions about Draco Malfoy ran deep. He was certain that Malfoy was plotting something terrible, yet instead of confiding in the adults, he took matters into his own hands. Armed with his invisibility cloak, eavesdropping spells, and even a few well-placed potions, Harry began his covert operations. Hermione, as always, voiced her concerns. "You cannot just spy on him, Harry," she warned. But Harry, driven by instinct and fear, didn't listen. He was convinced that Malfoy was working for the Death Eaters, and he wasn't about to sit back and wait. The most questionable moment came when Harry enlisted Ginny as help. He asked her to distract Malfoy so he could sneak into his room and search for clues. "You sure this is a good idea?" Hermione asked, her voice tinged with frustration. But Harry pushed forward, using deceit and magic in the halls of Hogwarts to get what he thought was the truth. Lies, manipulation, and secretive magic. All of it went unchecked. No reprimand, no punishment, just the feeling that once again Harry was above the rules. Number 13, sneaking into the Ministry of Magic in school uniform. Harry never forgot the moment he saw Sirius writhing in pain inside the Department of Mysteries. The vision struck him like a physical blow. "He's got him! He's torturing him!" Harry gasped, convinced Voldemort was holding his godfather captive. Instead of seeking Dumbledore or McGonagall, He gathered Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, and Ginny. They boarded the Thestrals and flew into London wearing nothing but their Hogwarts school robes, children headed straight into the heart of the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry atrium felt enormous and hostile as they slipped inside. Their shoes echoed across the marble floor. Every statue seemed to watch them. Yet they pushed forward, breaking into the Department of Mysteries and stepping into the circular room of spinning doors. Harry whispered, "He's in here somewhere," but Sirius wasn't there. Instead, masked Death Eaters emerged from the shadows. Bellatrix Lestrange laughed as curses crackled through the air. Ron was struck by a brain creature. Hermione collapsed after a silent curse from Dolohov. Neville's nose shattered. The children fought with desperation, not skill, and the halls erupted with chaos. The battle ended on the dais beneath the veil. Sirius fell through it, his expression frozen in surprise. Harry screamed his name until his voice broke. The ministry walls shook with the aftermath. Shattered prophecies, ruined rooms, scorch marks from unforgivable curses. 6 Hogwarts students had infiltrated a restricted government department, engaged in combat with Voldemort's elite, and survived only because the Order of the Phoenix arrived. And yet, after the dust settled, no one expelled them, no one arrested them. Hogwarts sent no punishments, the ministry filed no charges. All that remained was grief, guilt, and the unbearable weight on Harry's shoulders, the knowledge that one reckless mission had cost Sirius his life. Number 14. Using forbidden magic during defense against the dark arts lessons. Dolores Umbridge had outlawed the use of real defensive magic. Her lessons became nothing more than quiet reading sessions under her syrupy, poisonous smile. "Wands away," she would chirp, forcing students to copy lines about theoretical safety. But in secret, Harry led an entirely different class. Deep inside the Room of Requirement, Dumbledore's army gathered beneath shifting torchlight. The air buzzed with anticipation. Harry stood at the front and said, "We're going to learn to fight." And they did, with real spells, real risks, and real fire in their eyes. Neville Longbottom was one of the first to volunteer. Harry taught him the disarming charm, guiding his hand, steadying his wand. When Neville finally shouted, "Expelliarmus," and sent Seamus's wand spinning across the room, the students erupted with cheers. It was more than practice, it was rebellion. Hermione kept track of every spell on long parchment lists. Ron formed dueling pairs. Even shy Luna Lovegood cast stunning spells with a dreamy sort of focus that made sparks dance in the air. But the most dangerous moments came when students tested Petrificus Totalis on each other. One night, Ginny aimed her wand at Zachariah Smith and said the words with fierce confidence. The spell slammed him into the cushions with a thud, his arms locked to his sides, his eyes froze wide in indignation. Laughter filled the room, but they all sensed how far they were pushing the line. They were performing full-body bind curses in a hidden chamber while a ministry-appointed professor strutted through the halls hunting for signs of rebellion. Any other group of students would have faced expulsion or even legal consequences for practicing banned defensive magic. Secret combat training inside Hogwarts was no small offence. But when the truth came out, the blame fell on Umbridge, not on them. Harry walked away, not as a rule-breaker, but as a symbol of resistance. The school whispered his name with pride, not fear, proof that sometimes breaking the rules wasn't an act of defiance, but an act of survival. Number 15. Skipping classes for personal investigations. Harry, Ron, and Hermione skipped classes with the same determination other students used to pass exams. When something suspicious stirred inside Hogwarts, lessons simply stopped mattering. Hermione always tried to keep up, leaving behind neatly written essays, but Harry and Ron vanished from the classroom the moment a mystery appeared. Their professors often noticed empty seats, yet no detentions followed. It was as if the teachers sensed that trouble and the Golden Trio were inseparable. One of the clearest examples happened in Half-Blood Prince. Harry became obsessed with discovering the identity of the Half-Blood Prince. During his lessons, he barely listened, and when the opportunity came to investigate, he slipped out of class with Ron at his side. "We'll be back before anyone notices," Ron whispered, though they both knew it wasn't true. Instead of practicing counter-curses, they prowled the corridors, searching for clues in old textbooks and scribbled notes. The school day continued without them. Their absences became even more frequent when they began researching Horcruxes. Hermione dragged them into the library at hours when they were supposed to be in Transfiguration. Harry paced between shelves, muttering, "There has to be something here." "Something Dumbledore saw." Ron glanced nervously at the clock, already late for charms, but he followed anyway. They spent entire lessons digging through dusty volumes, convinced that finding Voldemort's secrets mattered more than any homework. They even skipped class to spy on Severus Snape. Harry was certain Snape and Draco Malfoy were plotting together, and nothing, not even McGonagall's strict schedule, could compete with that suspicion. One afternoon, instead of attending herbology, the trio hid behind a statue on the 6th floor, listening to Snape, whose cold voice echoed down the hall. "You are not alone, Draco," Snape whispered, and Harry's eyes widened. They should have been pruning plants, but instead they were deep in an investigation that could have earned them a month of detentions. Yet again, no teacher confronted them. Hogwarts seemed to hold its breath, silently allowing the trio to chase dangers no ordinary students would dare to face. Number 16. Illegal access to Slughorn's memory in his office. Harry knew Horace Slughorn was hiding something. Dumbledore had made it clear the memory of Tom Riddle asking about Horcruxes was the key to understanding Voldemort's power, but Slughorn refused every polite request. "I don't know what you're talking about, Harry." "And that's final?" he snapped after yet another attempt. So Harry turned to a different method. He uncorked the fake bottle of Felix Felicis, not the real potion, but a trick meant to convince Slughorn he had luck on his side. The idea was reckless, yet it glowed with the impulsive brilliance so typical of him. That night, with the potion, warm in his veins only in imagination, Harry walked straight into Slughorn's office. The air smelled of crystallized pineapple and a heavy gilt. Slughorn looked up with panic in his eyes, already sensing Harry's intent. Harry spoke softly, urging him to do the right thing, and each word pressed deeper. He wasn't threatening Slughorn, not directly, but the pressure was unmistakable. The professor shrank under the weight of his own conscience. Slughorn tried to resist. He clutched his chest, muttering, "Don't ask me, Harry. I can relive that night." But Harry continued. He reminded Slughorn of his mother, of Lily Evans, of the young girl the professor had adored. He said, "You owe her the truth." Slughorn, as resistance cracked, his wand trembled. A A silver thread of memory spilled into the vial between them, swirling like smoke caught in moonlight. Harry had won, not through diplomacy, but through emotional leverage sharper than any spell. If another student had done this, the punishment would have been severe. Entering a professor's private office under false pretenses, using manipulation to obtain a protected memory, taking information the teacher explicitly refused to give. It was a boundary no student should cross, but Harry walked away without consequences, carrying the vial to Dumbledore, a reminder of how blurry the line between necessity and wrongdoing could become at Hogwarts. Number 17. Secretly eavesdropping with the two-way mirror. Harry first discovered the true power of Sirius Black's two-way mirror in Half-Blood Prince. At first, he used it the way Sirius intended, as a simple way to keep in touch. But the mirror quickly became more than that. It became a window into places Harry could not reach, a window he wasn't always supposed to look through. One evening, when Gryffindor Tower felt strangely quiet, Harry felt a sudden tension in the air. Something's wrong, he thought, gripping the mirror tighter. Worried that Sirius might be in danger, Harry raised the mirror and whispered, "Sirius, are you there?" The surface shimmered. Nothing answered. But in that silence, Harry realized something else. The mirror could be used to observe, not just to speak. It was a dangerous discovery, one that felt both thrilling and deeply intrusive. Driven by fear and curiosity, he looked again, hoping for a glimpse of whatever was happening beyond the walls. Later that same night, he used the mirror once more, this time not to reach Sirius, but to check what was happening inside Hogwarts itself. Through the faint blur of magic, he caught the outline of a figure moving through the corridors. "Show me," Harry whispered. He knew this wasn't how Dumbledore intended students to handle magical communication, yet he couldn't resist. The mirror felt like forbidden knowledge, powerful, tempting, and too easy to misuse. If such an object had fallen into the hands of someone less responsible, the consequences would have been far worse. Imagine Draco Malfoy or even Zachariah Smith using it to spy on private conversations in the dormitories. Secrets would crumble in hours, trust would fall apart. Even Harry admits in the book, "I shouldn't have looked, but I had to." His words reveal the truth. The two-way mirror may seem harmless, but in the wrong moment or the wrong hands, it becomes a silent, perfect tool for eavesdropping. Number 18. Operation Free the House Elf. The operation to liberate the House Elves was one of the most controversial yet heroic moments for Hermione Granger and the Golden Trio in the Harry Potter series. It stands as an example of how their sense of justice often led them to break rules and intervene in situations that, while well-meaning, could be seen as reckless or overstepping. At the heart of this particular act was Hermione's unyielding advocacy for the rights of house elves, a cause she passionately championed, yet one that raised questions about the power dynamics and ethics of her actions. Hermione's commitment to the house elves began long before the start of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, but it reached its peak when she founded the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, SPEW. This club was an attempt to address the widespread mistreatment and subjugation of house elves, who were essentially slaves to the wizarding families they served. Hermione, whose innate sense of justice was evident in her every action, found the idea of house elves toiling without pay, without rights, and in some cases being brutally punished absolutely abhorrent. It was something that, despite the magical community's widespread acceptance of it, could not sit right with her. In her eyes, the key to changing the status quo was to bring awareness to the plight of these magical creatures. She began by pushing for the house elves' rights to be discussed openly, something unheard of in the wizarding world. She saw their work as slavery, their status as oppression, and she couldn't ignore it. Thus, the founding of SPEW was a natural step. However, what started as a noble attempt to raise awareness would quickly turn into something far more controversial, as Hermione began to take increasingly radical steps. Hermione's first big leap into action occurred when she decided that simply talking wasn't enough. She knew that for real change to happen, the house elves would have to be liberated from the servitude they were born into. And so she devised a plan to free them, though in doing so she completely disregarded the norms and the boundaries set by the wizarding community. Without consulting anyone, Hermione started smuggling clothes into the kitchens at Hogwarts, surreptitiously tossing them to the house elves in the hopes that they would recognize it as a signal of their emancipation. In the wizarding world, house elves were bound to their families, serving them loyally until they received clothes, a symbol of freedom, something they themselves would never seek out. One of the most powerful moments of this operation was her act of liberating Dobby, the house elf Harry Potter had freed from servitude at the Malfoy Manor. The bond between Hermione and Dobby was deep, and Hermione took the idea of freeing house elves as a personal mission. But while Dobby was delighted with his newfound freedom, the very concept of Hermione's actions would prove to be problematic. The house elves were not all desperate for their freedom, and many, like Kreacher, saw their servitude as a duty and part of their magical identity. Their laws and customs were different from the human understanding of freedom. It was a matter of perspective, one that Hermione failed to see in her passionate drive to do what she believed was right. The act of giving clothes to house elves and thus breaking the magical rules binding them to their masters was an extremely risky one. For one, house elves didn't want to be freed. They were conditioned to serve and found deep fulfillment in their roles. This created a moral dilemma. Was it right for Hermione to impose her beliefs about freedom on a group of magical beings who didn't necessarily share them? She had no way of knowing how the house elves truly felt, and yet she took it upon herself to force change in a system that was thousands of years old, one that operated within its own rules and within its own social order. Hermione's actions, while heroic in the sense that they were driven by compassion and justice, also revealed the limits of her worldview. She was acting on the belief that everyone should want the same things she did, that they should all be fighting for the same kind of freedom. But in reality, she was interfering with a system far more complex than she had ever imagined. The house elves, in their servitude, found a sense of identity and purpose that Hermione's intervention could not comprehend. And while it might seem that she was doing what was right by setting them free, her actions reflected a disregard for the house elves' autonomy to make their own decisions. What's more, Hermione's decision to take matters into her own hands without the consent of others was a serious breach of school rules and the greater societal norms of the wizarding world. Hogwarts, after all, was a school of learning, and not a place where students should be acting unilaterally to change the lives of others. There were protocols, there were rules, and there were authorities in charge. But Hermione, as always, believed that the end justified the means. And so she moved forward without regard for the boundaries that had been set before her. In many ways, her decision to free the house elves was similar to Harry, his disobedient acts throughout the series. Both he and Hermione, especially in their younger years, often felt that the laws and rules of the wizarding world didn't hold the same weight as their personal sense of right and wrong. Hermione was able to justify her actions in the name of justice and compassion, but the fact remained that she had crossed a line. By taking the matter into her own hands, she had taken the liberty of dictating the fates of others, and that was not something that could simply be forgiven or overlooked. Number 19. Interfering with the Tri-Wizard Tournament. In the fourth book of the Harry Potter series, the Golden Trio, Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley, found themselves caught in a situation that tested their loyalty and moral compass more than ever before. The Tri-Wizard Tournament, a magical competition meant for students of the three largest wizarding schools, was intended to be a fair and challenging test for its champions. However, for Harry, it quickly became a nightmare. At just 14, he was thrust into a deadly series of tasks against his will after mysteriously being chosen as a fourth champion. The tournament, designed to be an elite contest, became a terrifying ordeal for Harry, who was far too young and unprepared to compete. The entire event was stacked against him, and yet, as always, Harry was never alone. His friends, Hermione and Ron, did everything in their power to help him survive and thrive, even if it meant breaking the rules. The rules of the tournament were stringent, and any violation could result in disqualification or worse, a possible fatal end to the competitors. Yet the Golden Trio, ever determined to keep Harry safe, found themselves consistently bending, if not outright breaking, these rules. At no point did they hesitate to use their wits, resources, and forbidden magic to help Harry succeed. In many ways, this was a critical turning point for the trio, showcasing not only their courage, but also their willingness to defy authority when it came to protecting their friend. One of the most glaring violations occurred during the very first task, where Harry was required to retrieve a golden egg from a Hungarian horntail, a dragon that could easily kill him. Hermione, ever resourceful, came up with the idea to help Harry prepare for the task using a spell far beyond what was taught in the standard Hogwarts curriculum. The spell, Actio, was used to summon objects from a distance, and Hermione, without hesitation, taught Harry how to use it. The problem was Actio was not a spell that was typically taught to second-year students. It was far more advanced. The spell's power and potential were well beyond what the school curriculum would have allowed, yet Hermione believed it was necessary for Harry's survival. She had learned the spell from a book she had found in the library, and she knew that its power could give Harry the edge he needed, despite knowing that this spell was considered too powerful for their age. Hermione's determination to help Harry never wavered. It was a risky move, not only because of the potential danger, but also because using an unauthorized spell could have led to serious consequences for them all. If caught, they could have been expelled from the school or worse, disqualified from the tournament. But Hermione was resolute. She taught Harry to use Actio, and with this new knowledge, Harry was able to summon his broomstick during the first task, narrowly escaping the dragon, Fiery Breath. It was a stunning example of how the trio, driven by their desire to protect Harry, would go to any length to ensure his safety, even if that meant breaking the rules. As the tournament progressed, so did the trio willingness to break rules. Each task required Harry to face increasing dangers, and each time Hermione and Ron went further out of their way to help him, often flouting the strict guidelines of the competition. One particularly memorable moment came during the second task, when Harry was asked to rescue something precious from the depths of the Black Lake. The task required the champions to dive underwater and retrieve a hostage, but Harry was unsure how he would breathe underwater for such a prolonged period. Once again, Hermione had the answer. She secretly went to the library and found a spell for a water-breathing charm, another spell well beyond their year studies. She then quietly taught Harry how to perform the charm, ensuring he could survive the underwater portion of the task. But it wasn't just Hermione who broke the rules. Ron, too, played a crucial role in helping Harry throughout the tournament, often with more subtle but equally dangerous actions. He spent countless hours helping Harry study the clues in the tournament and strategize ways to win, often going against what was officially permitted by the judges and the tournament organizers. Ron's support was unwavering even when it meant risking his own safety by sneaking around and gathering forbidden information to aid Harry in his attempts. The trio's rule-breaking didn't stop there. As the tournament went on, they continued to bend the rules in increasingly bold ways. During the third task, Harry was forced to navigate a maze filled with dangerous creatures and magical traps. The entire school was watching, and the pressure was immense. With each twist and turn in the maze, Harry was faced with life-threatening dangers, but he was never alone. Hermione and Ron continued to support him, using their knowledge and access to Hogwarts, resources to help him in ways that no other competitor had the luxury of. They sneaked into the library late at night, researched the magical creatures within the maze, and even consulted with older students who had knowledge about the labyrinth. None of this was allowed, but the Golden Trio's loyalty to Harry was stronger than any fear of punishment. Perhaps the most poignant moment of rule-breaking came when the trio discovered the truth behind the mysterious events surrounding the tournament. They found out that Harry's participation had been orchestrated by dark forces, and the entire tournament was a trap designed to bring him to Lord Voldemort. This revelation set them on a new mission, one that required them to break every rule and defy every authority in order to help Harry survive the final task. When the trio realized the tournament was not about competition, but about bringing Harry to Voldemort, they knew that they had to act quickly and decisively. Number 20. Breaking into Umbridge's office. The story of Harry, Hermione, and Ron breaking into Dolores Umbridge's office represents a pivotal moment in the series where the trio not only defied authority, but also set the stage for their future acts of rebellion. The scene, found in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, is one of the most daring and risky adventures undertaken by the trio, and it serves as a perfect example of their willingness to break the rules for a cause they believed in. In this moment, they knowingly violated Hogwarts' strictest regulations, infiltrating the office of the tyrannical Dolores Umbridge and performing a covert operation to make contact with the Order of the Phoenix. It all began when Dolores Umbridge was appointed as the Ministry of Magic, Est-Tictes, quote, 2014 at Hogwarts. Her arrival marked a dark period in the school's history. Under her rule, she imposed draconian measures that stifled free speech, controlled the students, and undermined everything that had once made Hogwarts a place of curiosity and learning. The students were subjected to her cruel and manipulative tactics, and she punished anyone who dared challenge her authority. But it wasn't just the students who suffered under her reign. The very essence of the school's values, loyalty, integrity, and courage, was slowly being smothered by her oppressive regime. For Harry and his friends, however, there was a deeper cause to fight for than mere resistance to Umbridge, as cruelty. The Order of the Phoenix, an underground group dedicated to fighting Lord Voldemort, was desperately trying to resist his growing power, but they were severely hampered by Umbridge, surveillance, and the Ministry as interference. The only way for Harry to communicate with the Order was through the Floo network, a magical transportation system that allowed people to travel by fireplace, and the only place where this communication was possible was in Umbridge's office. This placed the trio in an unenviable position. They had to break into the office, retrieve the Floo powder, and make contact with the Order, all while avoiding detection. The very idea of such an operation might have seemed unthinkable to most students, but not to Harry, Hermione, and Ron. They had faced danger before, but this time the stakes were higher. They had no choice but to take matters into their own hands. Instead of seeking help from the adults, who were either too distracted or too powerless to do anything, the trio devised their own plan. The task was simple in theory: sneak into Umbridge's office, retrieve the Floo powder from the fire, and use it to reach the Order. But the dangers were manifold. Umbridge's office was heavily warded, and there was no way to be sure that they wouldn't be caught in the act. On the night of the operation, they snuck out of Gryffindor Tower under the cover of darkness. With their hearts racing, the trio carefully made their way through the dimly lit hallways of Hogwarts. They knew the consequences of being caught would be dire. Under normal circumstances, any student caught breaking into a professor, his office would face immediate expulsion. But these weren't normal circumstances. They were dealing with a corrupt ministry, a sinister new inquisitor, and a world on the brink of chaos. The rules no longer applied, and the trio knew that the risks were worth it. The security charms guarding Umbridge's office posed the first major obstacle. They had learned from past experiences that breaking into a magically protected space wasn't an easy feat. Hermione, with her vast knowledge of magic, had already prepared a solution. She whispered an incantation under her breath, and a series of complex charms began to unravel in the air. She used the Alohomora spell to unlock the door, but it wasn't enough. The office was protected by a series of protective wards, which meant the trio had to get creative. Using a combination of stealth, magic, and clever thinking, they slowly but surely disabled the various traps set to protect Umbridge's secrets. Once inside, they faced another challenge: the Floo powder. The fire in Umbridge's office was enchanted to transport anyone who used it directly to the Ministry, but it wasn't just a matter of grabbing the powder from the mantelpiece. Umbridge had set up her own magical security to prevent anyone from making unauthorized use of the fireplace. In this case, Hermione's quick thinking was once again invaluable. She pulled out a vial of dragon liver oil, a substance that could dampen the magic of any protective spells, and carefully rubbed it on her hands. Then, with a muttered charm, she disarmed the magical barrier that kept them from taking the Floo powder. At that moment, the trio knew they had succeeded, but not for long. They had just a few seconds to grab the powder, and use it before umbrage, his security measures kicked back into place. Their time was running out and the stakes had never been higher. They had no way of knowing whether anyone would come into the office at any moment, but they pressed on. As they grabbed the powder and prepared to use it, a sudden noise from the hallway caused their hearts to leap into their throats. They barely made it out of the office before they were nearly caught. As they fled down the hallway, their hearts pounding in their chests, they knew they had been dangerously close to getting caught. The tension was palpable. Every footstep could be the last before they were discovered. But they made it. They managed to reach the fire, throw the flu powder into it, and contact the Order of the Phoenix, securing the crucial information they needed to continue their fight against Voldemort. Number 21. Using the Half-Blood Prince Test Book. In the 6th book of the Harry Potter series, The Half-Blood Prince, an intriguing and dangerous twist unfolds, one that sees Harry Potter, the young wizard, break the rules in a way that his peers and even his professors never fully acknowledge. In this book, Harry finds a mysterious potions textbook once owned by the so-called Half-Blood Prince. This book becomes a key element in Harry's education, yet it introduces a troubling series of moral and ethical dilemmas. It is a case where the lines between what is right and what is forbidden blur, leading Harry into dangerous territory that puts not only his own safety at risk, but the safety of others, including his enemy, Draco Malfoy. The book is a revelation for Harry. When he first opens it, it seems like a goldmine. The margins are filled with handwritten notes, corrections, and secret spells that make even the most complicated potions recipes easier to follow. He immediately notices the advantages it provides. Not only is the book more detailed than the standard textbook, but it also offers tips and shortcuts that are clearly unknown to the rest of the wizarding world. In essence, Harry stumbles upon a treasure trove of forbidden knowledge, information that was never intended to be shared with students. As he continues using the book, he begins to excel in his potions class, much to the admiration of Professor Slughorn, who is unaware that Harry's success is largely due to the mysterious textbook. But the book's true danger lies in its darker secrets. Among the spells it contains is the deadly Sectum Sempra, a cursed charm with horrific consequences. The spell, unknown to Harry, is a bloodletting hex that causes deep cuts and wounds to the target. The first time Harry uses it is in a moment of anger during a confrontation with Draco Malfoy. In their encounter, Draco insults Harry, and in a fit of frustration and instinct, Harry casts the spell, causing Draco to collapse in pain, blood pouring from his wounds. The effects of the curse are devastating, and only the intervention of Professor Snape, the true owner of the Half-Blood Prince's book, saves Draco's life. Harry's use of Sectum Sempra marks a serious breach of school rules, even though he didn't fully understand what the spell was capable of. It's a spell that should never have been taught to a student, let alone used without supervision. What's more troubling is that Harry doesn't just stumble upon a harmless trick. He finds a weapon, one that is capable of causing irreparable harm. This is not merely a mistake in judgment, it's an instance of Harry engaging in something far darker than the usual school mischief. He doesn't stop to think about the consequences of using an unknown, dangerous spell against another student. There is no teacher oversight or parental guidance. Instead, Harry is left to experiment with this deadly power alone, relying on the book and his intuition, which leads him down an increasingly risky path. The problem, however, is not just Harry his use of the spell. The very fact that the book was even available to him in the first place points to a larger issue within Hogwarts. The school, an institution that prides itself on safety and education, is shown to be severely lacking in the control and regulation of its educational materials. Professor Slughorn, despite being a respected educator, is unaware of the book, its origins, or its dangerous contents. There is no indication that the book has been checked for safety or examined by anyone with authority. It is, after all, a student's son's personal possession, a relic passed down from an anonymous source, the mysterious Half-Blood Prince. The book had clearly been used before, but by whom and for what purpose remains a mystery. There is no way for anyone to know just how many students could have come into contact with this potentially lethal source of magic. The breach of rules here is clear. Harry, a student of Hogwarts, is using a book that has not been vetted by the school SES professors, nor is it sanctioned by any official educational body. The book itself is an illegal source of knowledge, a violation of the trust that the school places in its students to learn only from safe, approved texts. By using the book, Harry is essentially bypassing the system set in place to protect students from dangerous magic. The very existence of such a book within the confines of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry reflects a severe lapse in responsibility. There is no way of knowing how many other dangerous spells are hidden within its pages, waiting to be discovered by an unsuspecting student. Harry's actions are also more concerning when we consider the nature of his relationship with authority at Hogwarts. Throughout the series, Harry has always operated with a sense of defiance, often disregarding rules and regulations when he believes they interfere with what he feels is right. His use of the Half-Blood Prince book is yet another example of his willingness to challenge authority when it suits him. This is not the first time Harry has bent the rules. From sneaking into the Forbidden Forest to breaching the Ministry of Magic security during his 4th year, Harry has never been one to respect the boundaries of the system. But this time, his disregard for the rules results in more than just a few consequences. He is, for the first time, dealing with a form of magic that could cause actual harm, not just to himself, but to others as well. One might argue that Harry's use of the book is a moment of moral ambiguity, a struggle between what is right and what seems to be the most effective means of achieving a goal. Harry is not using the book with malice or intent to harm. In fact, he is motivated by a desire to excel in his classes and prove himself to Professor Slughorn, who has always held him in high regard. But the consequences of his actions are severe. He uses a forbidden spell out of frustration, and the results are disastrous. Draco Malfoy, a student Harry has long considered an enemy, suffers deeply, and yet despite the severity of the incident, Harry receives only a mild reprimand, which is not nearly enough to address the gravity of his actions. The lack of consequences for Harry's behavior is another serious flaw in the educational system of Hogwarts. As Harry grapples with the aftermath of the incident, he is forced to confront the reality of what he has done. There is a sense of guilt and remorse, but it is not enough to dissuade him from continuing to use the book. Even after the encounter with Draco, Harry continues to rely on the Half-Blood Prince. This book, convinced that it will help him with his studies and provide him with the edge he needs to succeed. He is not fully aware of the deeper implications of using such a source, and despite receiving a reprimand, he continues to wield the power of the book without fully understanding the consequences. The fact that Harry, a student was able to access such dangerous materials without the proper supervision or checks underscores a much larger issue at play. Hogwarts, an institution built on tradition and safety, has failed to provide its students with the necessary safeguards against the dangers of unregulated magic. The very existence of the Half-Blood Prince, his book within the walls of Hogwarts, highlights the school's inability to maintain control over what its students are learning. The fact that Harry could gain access to such dangerous knowledge despite being well-meaning reveals a fundamental flaw in the way magic is taught and monitored at Hogwarts. This incident with the Half-Blood Prince's book marks a turning point in Harry's relationship with authority and magic. For the first time, he is confronted with the reality that not all magic is safe, even when it seems to be useful. The book, in its allure, tempts him to push the boundaries of what is considered acceptable, and the results are disastrous. While Harry's actions may not have been intentionally harmful, they reveal a deeper issue within Hogwarts, an issue that continues to resonate throughout the entire series. The lessons learned from this episode are far-reaching, not only for Harry, but for the entire wizarding world. Number 22. Fleeing the battlefield at the end of 6th year. The night was dark and filled with dread. The once comforting walls of Hogwarts had become a breeding ground for fear and uncertainty. With the death of Albus Dumbledore, the wizarding world was plunged into chaos. The ever-present shadow of Lord Voldemort loomed larger than ever, and the school, which had always been a symbol of hope and order, now felt like a place of confinement and fear. The aftermath of the tragedy left the students reeling, and it was in this environment that Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley made one of the most audacious decisions of their lives. They chose to leave the sanctuary of Hogwarts and embark on a mission that would forever change the course of the Wizarding War. The Golden Trio, as they were often called, had always been brave, sometimes recklessly so, but this decision was something beyond their usual bounds of loyalty and courage. They decided to take matters into their own hands, bypassing the instructions of the adults around them. After all, they had already faced perilous challenges together and had proven themselves time and time again. But this time, their defiance was more serious than ever before. The mission was clear: find and destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. However, there was no concrete plan, no clear understanding of how to carry out this monumental task. And most critically, they had no permission to leave the school grounds. At the moment when they made their choice, Hogwarts felt like a cage. The Death Eaters had infiltrated the school in increasing numbers, and the oppressive security measures seemed more like a gilded prison than a haven. The trio, who had lived through some of the darkest moments of their lives, found themselves questioning everything. They knew the dangers that awaited them outside the castle walls, but their resolve had been solidified. They felt as though they had no other choice. The weight of their shared history with Dumbledore, his trust in them, his belief in their strength, compelled them to act. The problem with their plan was that there was no plan, no real structure, no clear financial or logistical backing, just a shared sense of urgency and a deep, collective need to honor the memory of their beloved headmaster. They could not bear to sit idly by as the world fell apart, but there was more to their decision than just a desire to protect others. The mystery of the Horcruxes had been a personal one. Each of them had seen firsthand the destructive power of Voldemort, his magic, and they knew that to defeat him they had to find a way to destroy the pieces of his soul that he had hidden away. The trio did not hesitate. After making the fateful decision to leave, they snuck out of Hogwarts in the dead of night, under the cover of darkness. They left behind the safety of their friends and teachers who had been working tirelessly to keep them safe. The school had imposed stricter security measures after the loss of Dumbledore, with wards and spells designed to keep the students within the castle grounds. But this did little to deter Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They had already proven themselves to be capable of breaking the rules before, but this time their defiance was more than an act of rebellion. It was an act of war. They were no longer mere students of Hogwarts. They were warriors in the fight against Voldemort. The decision to leave the school was not one made lightly. They understood the risks they were taking. They had no money, no supplies, and no concrete idea of how to even begin their search for the Horcruxes. Their only hope lay in the vague clues left by Dumbledore, a man whose death had shattered their faith in the adult world. Even more daunting, they were leaving behind their families and friends, people who had no idea of the full extent of the dangers they were about to face. This was not just a matter of sneaking out of the castle, it was a complete break from the world they had known for the past 6 years. The school, in a sense, had been a shield for them. It was where they had learned about the magical world, formed lifelong friendships, and fought countless battles. But now the idea of staying in the safety of Hogwarts felt like a betrayal. They knew that Voldemort was hunting them, and that staying in one place was no longer an option. But as they made their way away from the castle, the reality of their situation began to set in. What they were about to do was dangerous, dangerous in ways they had yet to comprehend. Their departure was an act of desperation. They were searching for something bigger than themselves, something that, if they succeeded in finding it, could change the course of the entire war. But as they crossed the boundary of the school grounds, there was no turning back. They were leaving behind the comforts of Hogwarts, the place where they had always felt safe. And they were stepping into a world that was unforgiving, dangerous, and filled with unknowns. In the weeks that followed, the trio travelled from place to place, relentlessly pursuing leads and hoping that they would stumble upon a clue that would bring them closer to the Horcruxes. The journey was arduous, fraught with danger, and often marked by moments of uncertainty. There were times when the weight of their decision felt unbearable, when they questioned whether they had made the right choice. The constant fear of being discovered, of being caught by Death Eaters, added to the tension. And yet, despite all the hardship, they pressed on. Each of them had their own motivations, their own reasons for continuing, but the bond they shared kept them going. It's important to recognize that this was not an isolated act of rebellion. In many ways, the trio's defiance mirrored the larger conflict at hand. In a world where fear and uncertainty ruled, where the very idea of authority was under siege, Harry, Ron, and Hermione took matters into their own hands. They were no longer children in a schoolroom. They were young adults facing the largest crisis their world had ever known. And while their decision to leave Hogwarts may have been reckless, it was also a testament to their belief in themselves and in each other. They had taken the fate of the wizarding world into their hands, choosing to leave the safety of Hogwarts behind in order to confront the growing darkness. but the consequences of this decision were far-reaching. In the days that followed, the trio was forced to reckon with the realities of the choices they had made. They found themselves in situations that tested their resolve, that pushed their friendship to the limits, and yet, through it all, they remained united. Their decision to embark on this perilous journey may have been one of youthful bravado, but it also showcased their unyielding determination to stop Voldemort at all costs, their decision to break the rules. To leave Hogwarts in the middle of a war is one of the defining moments of their journey. It was a moment that revealed not only their courage, but also their willingness to face impossible odds in order to do what was right. The road they travelled was long and fraught with danger, but it was a road they walked together, relying on each other to stay strong. It was, in many ways, the beginning of the end, an end that would come only after great sacrifice, but an end that would eventually lead to the defeat of Voldemort and the restoration of peace in the wizarding world. In hindsight, it is easy to criticize their decision, to point out the flaws in their thinking. They were young, inexperienced, and ill-prepared for the journey ahead. But what made them remarkable was their willingness to act in the face of overwhelming darkness, to take risks when others would have hesitated. In the end, their decision to break the rules and leave Hogwarts was not just an act of defiance, it was an act of courage, a decision to fight for something greater than themselves, something worth sacrificing for. Number 23, using magic outside of school. Harry Potter's world is one defined by strict magical laws and regulations, but within this framework, the Golden Trio, Harry, Hermione and Ron, often broke these rules without hesitation. The most notorious violation came in the form of using magic outside of Hogwarts, which was strictly forbidden by the Ministry of Magic. The rule, known as the underage magic prohibition, was in place to ensure that young witches and wizards did not wield magic before their education was complete. The Ministry's main concern was that unchecked magic could have disastrous consequences, particularly in the hands of those still learning how to control it. Yet, time and again, the Golden Trio found themselves in situations where the need for magic outweighed the fear of breaking the law. One of the most significant instances of rule-breaking occurred in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix during Harry's summer vacation at the Dursleys. Harry, desperate to protect his cousin Dudley from a group of Dementors, cast Expecto Patronum, a spell designed to ward off the dark creatures that feed on despair. In doing so, Harry broke the law by using magic outside of school, a clear violation of the Ministry prohibition. Though it was a desperate act of self-defense, the law didn't allow for exceptions, and the Ministry was quick to punish Harry. Despite this, Harry's Patronus saved Dudley's life, and the magic proved to be an essential tool in his defense. The Ministry's response was swift and severe. Harry's use of magic in front of Dudley, a Muggle, was considered a dangerous and unlawful act. He was promptly issued a letter from the Ministry threatening to expel him from Hogwarts and even sentencing him to a trial for breaking the law. This was not the first time Harry had been forced to defend himself, nor would it be the last. However, this particular incident highlighted the severe consequences of breaking magical laws, especially when the Ministry chose to make an example out of him. Though Harry was ultimately exonerated due to his act being one of self-defense, the entire situation revealed how the Ministry of Magic was more concerned with upholding laws than considering the necessity of a young wizard's actions. While Harry was the most prominent example, he wasn't the only member of the Golden Trio who used magic outside of Hogwarts. Hermione Granger, always prepared and ahead of the curve, used her magical abilities frequently, even when it meant breaking the rules. One of the most notable examples of this occurs in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when Hermione, Harry, and Ron used time-turners to travel back in time in order to save Sirius Black and Buckbeak from certain doom. Hermione, ever the rule follower, had been given permission to use a time-turner by Professor McGonagall, but the act of using it for the purpose of saving lives was a clear violation of the law regarding time travel. Though time travel was strictly regulated, Hermione's willingness to use magic in this way revealed her pragmatic approach to situations where the rules had to be bent for the greater good. Moreover, Hermione's tendency to use magic outside of school was evident on other occasions as well. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, she used the levitation charm to repair a broken broomstick when the trio was stranded in the middle of the Forbidden Forest. She also used the Alohomora spell to unlock doors in places where magic was forbidden. Although Hermione's intentions were never malicious, and she was always seeking to help those around her, her willingness to use magic outside of the school, its boundaries, was a recurring theme in the series. Ron Weasley, too, was no stranger to breaking the rules when it came to magic. Though often more laid back than his two friends, Ron's impulsive nature led him to cast spells in situations where the law forbade it. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Ron used the summoning charm to bring Harry his broomstick to him during the Quidditch World Cup. The act, although done in the heat of the moment, was a violation of the rules governing the use of magic in non-magical places. Though the use of magic in front of Muggles was dangerous and illegal, Ron was always more concerned with the immediate need for action rather than the consequences of breaking the law. The trio's repeated use of magic outside of school not only placed them in danger but also added a layer of complexity to their understanding of the magical laws that governed their world. As students at Hogwarts, they were expected to follow the rules, but as they matured and encountered increasingly perilous situations, the rules seemed less relevant. Magic, for them, became a tool to fight back against the darkness they faced, whether it was the growing threat of Lord Voldemort or the danger presented by magical creatures like Dementors. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the trio's use of magic continues, with Harry as increasing reliance on spells to defend himself and his friends. Though they may not have always been in immediate danger, the trio's use of magic outside of school demonstrated their growing sense of responsibility and their willingness to take matters into their own hands. They often saw themselves as the protectors of the wizarding world, and the lines between right and wrong began to blur as they grew older. The Ministry, however, did not view their actions with such leniency. To the Ministry, their repeated use of magic outside of Hogwarts was a violation of the law, and their actions only fueled the ongoing conflict between the Ministry and Harry's group. The issue of using magic outside of school was not simply a matter of breaking the law, but also one of control. The Ministry of Magic's strict regulation of underage magic was intended to protect young witches and wizards from the dangers of magical misuse. However, the Ministry's approach often felt restrictive and oppressive to Harry and his friends. Their repeated rule-breaking served as a form of resistance against the system that sought to control them, especially when they saw the Ministry as an obstacle rather than an ally in the fight against Lord Voldemort. The Ministry's response to the trio's actions reflected a deep mistrust of Harry and his friends, as well as an unwillingness to adapt to the changing realities of the wizarding world. Throughout the series, the Ministry of Magic often found itself at odds with the Golden Trio and sense of justice, particularly when it came to their use of magic. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the Ministry's failure to recognize the growing threat of Voldemort and his followers ultimately led to its downfall. The trio's ability to use magic outside of the confines of Hogwarts allowed them to resist the Ministry, his influence, and continue their quest to defeat the Dark Lord. Yet, the trio's use of magic was not without consequences. As the series progressed, they became more aware of the potential dangers of their actions. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily on them, especially as they faced the consequences of their decisions. The use of magic outside of Hogwarts was a powerful symbol of the trio, its desire to take control of their destinies, but it also highlighted the complexities of the magical laws they were forced to navigate. In the end, their use of magic was not just a matter of rebellion, but of survival. Through these repeated violations, J.K. Rowling illustrated how the trio, Orty's actions, challenged the very structures of power that governed their world. The use of magic outside of school became a symbol of their resistance to a system that sought to limit their freedom and control their destiny. But it also raised important questions about the nature of rules, laws, and authority. Should the Ministry of Magic have been so rigid in its approach, or should there have been more flexibility in recognizing the urgency of the trio as circumstances? Was the use of magic outside of Hogwarts truly a crime, or a necessary act of defiance in the face of an impending war? For Harry, Hermione, and Ron, the breaking of these magical laws was not a thoughtless act of rebellion, but a deeply considered response to the dangers they faced. Their use of magic outside the classroom may have been forbidden, but in their hearts they knew that it was the only way to protect themselves and the world they loved. Number 24. Breaking into Gringotts. The scene was set for one of the most daring and reckless escapades in the entire Harry Potter series. Gringotts, the most secure bank in the wizarding world, was not a place to be taken lightly. Known for its magical defenses, treacherous vaults, and a reputation for being impenetrable, it was a fortress of secrets, money, and powerful artifacts. For most wizards, the idea of even approaching the entrance was out of the question, let alone infiltrating its vaults. However, for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, the idea of following rules was something that always seemed secondary when the stakes were high. The trio's mission was one that no other students at Hogwarts could have dreamed of: to break into Gringotts, the most heavily guarded bank in the wizarding world. What they were after was no mere curiosity. They sought the elusive Horcrux hidden within one of its vaults. A Horcrux was one of the darkest magical objects holding pieces of Voldemort's soul. If they failed in their mission, the Dark Lord would continue his reign of terror. So, with the fate of the wizarding world hanging in the balance, Harry, Hermione, and Ron were about to take a step that would make even the most seasoned of wizards shudder. The plan was bold. They would use Polyjuice Potion to disguise themselves as wizards who had legitimate business in Gringotts. But this was no easy task. It required not just the potion, but a careful impersonation of Bellatrix Lestrange, a notorious Death Eater, whose appearance was as recognizable as her reputation. The trio relied on Hermione, with her knowledge of potions, to brew the polyjuice potion. After some minor setbacks, including Ron's unfortunate transformation into an unnervingly large spider, they finally achieved the perfect disguises. However, there was no time to waste. They had to act swiftly. Gringotts was a maze of stone corridors, each more mysterious and foreboding than the last. As they entered the bank, they could feel the weight of the magic that surrounded them. The air seemed thick with enchantments, and the silence was oppressive. Every step was a reminder that they were stepping into the heart of one of the most dangerous places in the magical world. The vaults were guarded by goblins whose keen eyes could detect the slightest irregularities in any spell, yet the trio's disguises held firm, and they were granted access without raising suspicion. The real danger began when they reached the vault that held the Horcrux. It was located deep within the labyrinthine depths of Gringotts, protected by layers upon layers of magical barriers. To make matters worse, the vault was a treasure trove of dark enchantments and traps. They had to break into it without triggering alarms or drawing attention, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione were no ordinary students. They were seasoned adventurers, having faced life-threatening challenges at every turn. Their ability to think on their feet was something that had been honed over the years. As they worked to unlock the vault, the tension in the air grew. Every second counted, and the gravity of their actions weighed heavily on them. This wasn't just a prank, a misguided attempt at rebellion, or a youthful act of defiance. This was a full-blown international crime. They were breaking into one of the most secure locations in the wizarding world, stealing a priceless artifact in the process. They were trespassing in a place where even the slightest mistake could result in their capture or worse, their deaths. It was a situation that could only be described as reckless, foolish, and utterly necessary. Once inside the vault, the chaos truly began. The Horcrux, a small golden cup, lay before them. But as they grabbed the cup and attempted to leave, everything spiraled out of control. A sudden, deafening roar echoed through the cavernous vaults, and before they could react, a massive dragon emerged from the depths of the vault. It was a Gringotts dragon, bound in chains, but still a formidable force of destruction. The dragon's roar shattered the air, and in an instant, the entire vault began to collapse. The trio had no choice but to flee. As the walls crumbled around them, they made a split-second decision that would go down in history. They would escape on the back of the dragon. It was a move that no one would have expected, a desperate attempt to flee from the wrath of Gringotts' security. They climbed onto the dragon's back, clutching the Horcrux, and held on as the beast soared through the collapsing tunnels. It was an escape that could only be described as breathtaking, terrifying, and utterly reckless. The dragon tore through the vaults, smashing through stone walls and causing havoc in its wake. The speed of the escape was dizzying, the sound of the dragon's wings deafening. They flew out of Gringotts, out of the underground labyrinth, and into the open sky. The bank's defenses, designed to stop any thief, had failed to contain them. They had succeeded, but at a price. The chaos they left behind would be felt for years to come. It was a moment that encapsulated everything that made the Golden Trio so extraordinary. They were not bound by rules, and they were not afraid to take on impossible odds. They had infiltrated one of the most secure locations in the magical world, stolen a Horcrux, and escaped on the back of a dragon, all while dressed as one of the most feared dark witches in history. They were young, but their bravery and determination had no equal. They were willing to break every rule in the book if it meant saving the world. This was not just a case of schoolyard rebellion. This was a serious international crime, one that would make even the most hardened criminals nervous. But for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, there was no other choice. They were fighting a war, and in war the rules were bent, if not outright broken. What mattered was the ultimate goal: defeating Voldemort and his forces. The trio's actions were not without consequences. While they managed to escape Gringotts, their daring heist would not go unnoticed. The Ministry of Magic, Gringotts, and other powerful forces would soon be hunting them down. The world of wizarding politics was about to become much more complicated, and their lives would never be the same again. Yet, in the grand scheme of things, none of that mattered. They had succeeded in their mission, they had taken a risk, and it had paid off. Their actions also highlighted the lengths to which they were willing to go for the greater good. It was a theme that ran throughout the series. Sometimes, in order to protect others, you have to make impossible choices and step outside the boundaries of what is considered acceptable. Harry, Hermione, and Ron knew this better than anyone. Their friendship, their loyalty, and their determination had driven them to accomplish what many would have considered unthinkable. In the end, the raid on Gringotts was a testament to their courage. It was a story of daring, defiance, and the pursuit of justice, no matter the cost. It was a story of young heroes who refused to play by the rules, who understood that sometimes the only way to win is to break the rules, and in doing so, they saved the world. Number 25. Violating magical creature handling rules. The events surrounding Harry, Ron, and Hermione in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets are filled with moments of courage, curiosity, and a deep sense of loyalty toward one another. However, one of the most notable and controversial moments of their adventures occurs when they knowingly break Hogwarts' strictest rules concerning magical creatures. It's a story of rebellion against authority, the sort of rule-breaking that we often see from Harry and his friends. But this particular instance stands out for the dangerous risks they took. The trio's trouble begins when they receive a mysterious letter from Hagrid. The message is cryptic, but it carries an unmistakable tone of urgency. In the letter, Hagrid urges them to follow the spiders. To any normal student of Hogwarts, such an invitation would be met with alarm and caution, as the very idea of interacting with magical creatures is dangerous enough. Yet Harry and Ron decide to heed Hagrid's words, trusting their friend, despite the potential dangers. The consequences of their decision, however, would plunge them into one of the most thrilling and perilous situations they had ever faced. Following Hagrid, Ursula's advice, Harry and Ron end up deep within the Forbidden Forest, an area that under normal circumstances is strictly off-limits to students. The Forbidden Forest, with its vast, untamed expanse and the variety of dangerous creatures that inhabit it, is a place fraught with peril. Students are typically warned to stay far away, and any exceptions are met with severe consequences. It is, after all, a place that even the most experienced wizards fear to enter alone, let alone young students. What follows is a reckless plunge into the very heart of that forbidden realm. As the boys venture deeper into the forest, they encounter one of the most terrifying creatures they have ever seen, Aragog, the giant Acromantula.
Acromantulas are massive, eight-legged spiders, and the mere mention of them causes most wizards to shudder. Their venom is deadly, and their hunger for human flesh is well known across the magical world. It is a creature that most would run from in sheer terror, but Harry and Ron do not. They approach it head-on, demonstrating a kind of bravery that few could replicate. The Ministry of Magic, the governing body of the magical world, had long since forbidden any approach to acromantulas. These creatures were considered far too dangerous to be kept under any form of control. To approach one, let alone engage with it, was not only reckless but also illegal. In a world where magical creatures were monitored by the Ministry for safety, breaking this rule was considered a serious offence.
It was a regulation designed to protect the public from the creature's dangerous natures, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione consistently found themselves questioning such restrictions, often for better or worse. Their meeting with Aragog, however, was not just a reckless act of curiosity. What they uncovered during this dangerous encounter proved to be invaluable. With courage bordering on foolishness, the boys risked their lives to learn something crucial. Aragog, despite his monstrous size and terrifying nature, provided them with important information about the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets, even though doing so went directly against all forms of safety protocols. The information they gathered from the acromantula helped them get closer to solving the mystery of the creature attacking students at Hogwarts, yet the way they acquired it was a blatant violation of the Ministry's rules. There is something inherently dangerous about the way Harry and his friends constantly push the boundaries set before them, especially when it comes to magical creatures. While their intentions are good, they rarely consider the risks involved in their actions. In this case, their disregard for the rules and their willingness to confront a creature as dangerous as Aragog could easily have resulted in their deaths. The enormity of the threat posed by the acromantula should not be underestimated. It is not a creature that could be tamed, nor was it likely to show mercy to intruders, especially not a group of young, unprepared students. In the world of wizardry, some things are better left alone, and the acromantula was one of them. But Harry and Ron's friendship and their desire to uncover the truth made them willing to take on such extreme risks. From a legal perspective, the Ministry of Magic would likely have issued a stern warning, or perhaps even harsher punishment, if they had been caught. Breaking the rule about approaching dangerous creatures, especially ones as deadly as an acromantula, was a serious violation, one that could have repercussions far beyond Hogwarts. But this was, as it often happens in the wizarding world, a case where the rules were bent, if not outright broken, for the sake of something greater. While the Ministry insisted on strict regulations, Harry and his friends often demonstrated that the rules weren't always right. Sometimes it was the breaking of those rules that led to the discovery of the truth and, ultimately, the saving of lives, and yet there is something heroic about this defiance. By venturing into the Forbidden Forest, the trio not only learned about the monster lurking in the depths, but also uncovered vital information that led them closer to solving the case of the Chamber of Secrets. Without that brave interaction with Aragog, the mysteries surrounding the chamber would have remained unsolved for much longer. The trio, his courage, their willingness to face their fears, and their drive to uncover the truth highlight a key theme in the series, that sometimes breaking the rules for the greater good is worth the risk. But what about the magical creatures themselves? The acromantulas, like many creatures in the wizarding world, are misunderstood. They are not inherently evil, though they are dangerous and pose a great threat to wizards and witches. Aragog, for example, was not a malevolent creature by nature. He had been abandoned by Hagrid and lived in the forest for many years, and his knowledge of the Chamber of Secrets was not something he shared out of malice. Rather, he was simply offering the truth, even though the truth he revealed was as dangerous as the encounter itself. This highlights another important aspect of the story. The creatures in the wizarding world, while dangerous, are often more complex than they appear at first glance. What Harry, Ron, and Hermione did was not only a rebellion against authority, but also an act of empathy toward the creatures of the magical world. Their willingness to engage with Aragog, even at the risk of their lives, showed a deep sense of respect for the creatures that others would rather ignore or exterminate. While the Ministry of Magic viewed acromantulas as a threat to be controlled or destroyed, Harry and his friends saw them as beings with knowledge, even if that knowledge came with a high price. The trio, his daring adventure into the Forbidden Forest and their encounter with Aragog, also showcase the broader themes of the Harry Potter series: bravery, friendship, and the importance of questioning authority when necessary. It's a reminder that sometimes the rules don't always have the right answers, and that true heroes are those who will go to great lengths, even breaking the rules, in order to seek the truth. Despite the danger and the risks involved, Harry and his friends acted with a sense of moral purpose that transcended mere rule-breaking. Their actions, in the end, saved lives and brought them closer to solving the mystery that had haunted Hogwarts. In doing so, they proved that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from moments of recklessness and defiance. Number 26. Participating in unauthorized duels. From the very first days at Hogwarts, Harry Potter and his friends Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley found themselves entangled in a world where the rules were often bent, stretched, or outright ignored. It was a place of mystery and wonder, but also one where danger lurked at every corner. And while the trio undoubtedly excelled in their studies, they were far from ordinary students when it came to abiding by the school's strict rules. Among their many exploits, one of the most significant and controversial was their participation in duels outside of class, an activity that not only put their magical skills to the test, but also placed them in direct conflict with Hogwarts regulations. Dueling was strictly forbidden outside the scope of lessons and official matches, as it posed a potential threat to student safety. Professor Snape and other teachers made it abundantly clear that magic, especially of the dark or dangerous variety, was not to be practiced recklessly. But Harry, Hermione, and Ron were hardly the type of students to follow the rules to the letter, particularly when it came to something as urgent as defending themselves against the rising tide of danger around them. One of the most notable examples of their rule-breaking came during their second year at Hogwarts, when Harry found himself at odds with Draco Malfoy. Malfoy, already known for his antagonistic behavior, made it his mission to provoke Harry and his friends at every turn. It was in the midst of this rivalry that Harry and Draco, along with their respective friends, found themselves in an impromptu duel in the middle of the night. The duel took place in a secluded corridor, far from the watchful eyes of any teachers. The stakes were high, and neither side was willing to back down. The young Gryffindors had no hesitation in accepting the challenge. Armed with their spells and a good deal of determination, they entered the duel with a sense of purpose. What began as a simple face-off quickly escalated into a chaotic and dangerous battle. Both sides used powerful spells, some of which could have easily injured or even killed someone if they weren't careful. But in the heat of the moment, it was clear that Harry and his friends had learned to defend themselves in ways that were not taught in any classroom. They were learning by doing, testing their abilities, and pushing the boundaries of their magical skills. Despite the risks, they felt an undeniable urgency to fight. They were not just dueling for pride or sport. The danger they faced was real, especially in the dark times that were closing in around them. The rise of Lord Voldemort, his followers, the Death Eaters, meant that Harry and his friends had to be prepared for anything. They knew that their safety and the safety of those they cared about was not something they could leave to chance. If they wanted to survive the challenges ahead, they needed to be able to defend themselves, even if it meant stepping outside the boundaries of Hogwarts rules. In their third year, the trio's dueling habits took on a new dimension. While the danger they faced continued to mount, they found themselves involved in more organized forms of dueling, notably when they participated in a secret training session in the Room of Requirement. The room, a magical space that could be altered to meet the needs of those who found it, became their sanctuary for practicing spells, learning defensive tactics, and preparing for the battles that lay ahead. In this secret training space, they honed their skills in a controlled environment, but still with the knowledge that they were breaking school rules. They were well aware of the fact that they were participating in something that the teachers would never condone. For Harry, Hermione, and Ron, the need to prepare for the worst outweighed the consequences of breaking the rules. It wasn't that they were reckless or naive, rather, they understood the importance of being ready. Magic was a tool, and like any tool, it could be wielded for both good and evil. If they were to face the dark forces threatening their world, they needed to know how to defend themselves, and they knew that the professors at Hogwarts could only teach them so much. It was in these forbidden moments, away from the eyes of authority, that they truly learned what it meant to be a wizard. The risk was not lost on them. They knew that they were gambling with their safety, not just from the spells of their opponents, but from the punishment they would face if caught. But their sense of responsibility outweighed the fear of consequences. This was particularly clear in their fourth year, when they found themselves not just dueling for self-defense, but in the midst of a larger conspiracy that threatened the very fabric of the wizarding world. The Triwizard Tournament was more than just a competition. It was a trap, a ploy to bring Harry into the clutches of Voldemort himself. During this time, dueling became even more essential. It wasn't just about defending themselves from schoolyard bullies or rivals. It was about survival in the face of a growing dark power. Perhaps one of the most poignant moments of their defiance came during the Battle of Hogwarts, when Harry, Hermione, and Ron, along with many other students, engaged in full-scale combat against Death Eaters and other dark forces. In this moment, the trio was no longer just breaking school rules for the sake of practice or self-defense. They were participating in a fight for the very survival of the wizarding world. It was in this final confrontation, amidst the chaos and destruction of battle, that their skills and their willingness to bend the rules were put to the ultimate test. Throughout these years, the trio's actions were constantly shaped by the world around them. They were not simply breaking rules for the thrill of it, they were acting out of necessity. They were learning what it took to be a part of something larger than themselves, to fight for the greater good. In the end, their willingness to take risks and break the rules was not just a rebellious streak, but a reflection of their understanding that the world they lived in was anything but normal. They were in a time of war, a time of uncertainty, and their actions, though often against the school's code, were driven by a deep-seated need to protect those they loved and to defeat the forces of evil. In considering the trio's disregard for the rules, it is clear that their actions were a reflection of their growth as individuals. Harry, Hermione, and Ron were not children anymore. They were young adults facing challenges and dangers that no one at Hogwarts had prepared them for. The rules of the school, important as they were, could not always contain the complexities of the world they were living in. They had to adapt, to learn, and to grow in ways that required breaking free from the constraints placed upon them. The lessons they learned from those duels, from those moments of rule-breaking, were perhaps the most valuable lessons of all. In many ways, the trio's actions serve as a reminder of the complexities of growing up in a world at war. They were faced with difficult choices that required them to prioritize the needs of the many over the rules of the few. Their willingness to step outside the lines was not just a form of rebellion, it was a manifestation of their commitment to something larger than themselves. And in the end, it was this spirit that helped them triumph over the darkness that threatened their world. Their story is one of bravery, friendship, and the willingness to fight for what is right, even when it means breaking the rules. Number 27. Secret use of portkeys. In the magical world of Harry Potter, the trio of Harry, Hermione, and Ron is constantly found bending or outright breaking the rules of Hogwarts. They act with courage, daring, and a deep sense of justice, yet they are often at odds with the authority of the school. One of the most blatant rule violations that the trio engages in is the unauthorized use of portkeys. These enchanted objects, which are meant to transport people to a specific location, are supposed to be strictly controlled, but as always, the Golden Trio uses them without the proper permissions, breaking the rules and putting themselves at risk. Portkeys are a fascinating piece of magical technology. The Ministry of Magic regulates their use tightly, ensuring they are only activated when the proper permissions are in place. These objects, when activated, immediately transport anyone holding them to a predetermined location. In most cases, these locations are carefully selected, such as the Quidditch World Cup Stadium or official government buildings. However, in the world of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, the rules surrounding portkeys are little more than suggestions. They choose to disregard them whenever the need arises, placing themselves in dangerous situations and often finding themselves at the heart of major events, without even a clear plan. One of the earliest and most shocking instances of the trio is disregard for portkey regulations happens during the Triwizard Tournament. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry and Cedric Diggory, both unexpectedly chosen as champions, are transported to the graveyard via a portkey set up by Barty Crouch Jr. to fulfill the dark plan of resurrecting Lord Voldemort. The book's description of their sudden and violent journey to the graveyard is chilling. Quote 42. Harry and Cedric were unaware that the portkey had been tampered with, that it was not the official one for the tournament, but a dark object set to take them straight into Voldemort's grasp. The danger they found themselves in was monumental, and the murder of Cedric Diggory on that very night is a turning point in the series, changing the course of history. Yet Harry and Cedric are not the only ones who face the consequences of misusing portkeys. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the trio makes another daring use of these magical objects when they flee from the Ministry of Magic, after barely escaping an attack from Death Eaters. With no time to waste, Hermione quickly prepares a portkey to get them out of the dangerous situation. But again, no official permissions are obtained, and the trio finds themselves breaking the rules as they flee from the scene. There is no planning or forethought, just an instinctive desire to survive and fight back against the forces of darkness. This time, the portkey takes them to a different location, a place not necessarily dangerous in itself, but far from safe when one considers the surrounding circumstances. For Hermione, Ron, and Harry, these rule-breaking actions are often motivated by necessity. They don't have the luxury of waiting for official permission from the Ministry or from Hogwarts. They are fighting for their lives, their friends, and ultimately the entire wizarding world. Their actions might be reckless, but they are driven by the urgency of the moment. The use of portkeys without proper clearance is just one example of how they bend or break the rules of magic, but it speaks to their greater defiance against the systemic control of the Ministry of Magic, the institution of Hogwarts, and the rules that often stifle action when it's needed most. Another instance of their disregard for regulations is seen in the Deathly Hallows when they use a portkey to escape from the Ministry. During a raid, they take advantage of a quickly forged portkey, hoping to slip away unnoticed. This time, they don't know where they are going, and there's no safety net to rely on. The trio's desperation for freedom and survival takes precedence over the rules and regulations that would otherwise govern their actions. Hermione, a stickler for rules and an advocate for following the rules, is the one who makes the decision to use the portkey. She may feel guilty afterward, but the urgency of the situation overrides her usual caution. Portkeys, while often presented as tools of convenience, are fraught with danger when not used correctly. They are magical instruments that rely on a strict set of rules for their operation, and those who break these rules risk serious consequences. However, the trio's sense of justice, especially when it comes to the larger fight against Voldemort, gives them a unique license to ignore those rules. They do so because they are, in a sense, rewriting the very narrative of the wizarding world. Their disregard for regulation is not an act of defiance against authority for its own sake, but a practical choice made out of necessity, where the greater good outweighs the dangers posed by disobedience. Yet the tension between following rules and acting when the moment demands it remains one of the central themes in the book. In the Goblet of Fire, the use of portkeys represents the larger question of control in the wizarding world. The Ministry of Magic, which is supposed to enforce order and safety, is easily manipulated by dark forces. The authorities fail to anticipate the dangers of the portkey used in the Triwizard Tournament, allowing Harry and Cedric to be swept away into danger without any safeguards. In this sense, the trio's decision to disregard the rules is also a comment on the flaws of a system that, in its rigidity, does not allow for quick action in times of peril. By the time we reach Deathly Hallows, the world is even more chaotic. The trio's use of the portkey in their flight from the Ministry of Magic highlights the sense of lawlessness that has gripped the wizarding world under Voldemort's control. They cannot rely on the ministry, which is now corrupted, and they cannot rely on the rules that they once respected. Instead, they are forced to rely on their own wits, their courage, and their ability to bend the rules in order to survive. In this moment, their rule-breaking becomes a symbol of resistance and resilience against a world gone wrong. The use of portkeys also reflects the trio's growth as characters. In the earlier books, they often find themselves in situations where their rule-breaking is more impulsive, the result of youthful impatience or miscalculation. But as the series progresses, their actions become more calculated and more aware of the consequences. In Deathly Hallows, Harry, Hermione, and Ron are no longer just mischievous students breaking the rules for fun. They are rebels, risking their lives for a cause that goes beyond Hogwarts and even beyond the wizarding world. The Golden Trio's actions are also a reflection of their relationships with each other. They trust one another implicitly, and this mutual trust allows them to take risks together. When they use a portkey without permission, they are doing so as a team, fully aware of the risks involved. This sense of solidarity and unity makes their rule-breaking feel less reckless and more like a collective decision to face the dangers together, no matter the consequences. It has this shared bond that allows them to act as they do, even when the world seems to be falling apart around them. In the end, the trio's use of portkeys without permission is just one example of their larger tendency to break the rules when necessary. It shows how they operate outside the bounds of the established system, relying on their instincts and their friendship to navigate a world that is constantly shifting and changing. The risks they take are immense, but so are the stakes. By breaking the rules, they carve out their own path and show that sometimes, in the face of great danger, the rules can be bent or broken for the greater good. Number 28. Forging school documents. In the magical world of Harry Potter, the rules of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry are clear. Students must follow them or face the consequences. However, those rules often seem to bend when the notorious Golden Trio, Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley, are involved. Their many adventures, which usually involve uncovering secrets or defeating dark forces, frequently lead them into situations where they must defy authority. But one of the most telling instances of rule-breaking occurs during their second year when they decide to brew Polyjuice Potion in order to gain information about the mysterious and suspicious Tom Riddle, the heir of Slytherin. This plotline highlights a significant moment in the trio's journey, not just as young wizards, but as rule-benders, where the students engage in an act of deception and manipulation under the very nose of their teachers. During their second year, Hermione, Harry, and Ron embark on one of their most daring schemes to learn the truth about the heir of Slytherin and the events surrounding the Chamber of Secrets. The method they choose is to brew the complex and dangerous Polyjuice Potion, which would allow them to temporarily take on the appearances of other students. They hope to use this to question Draco Malfoy, a suspect in their investigation. However, their plan involves much more than simply brewing a potion. It requires them to acquire materials from the restricted section of the Hogwarts Library, a place forbidden to students except with special permission. Hermione, being the diligent and rule-abiding student that she is, does her best to follow the protocol. However, her usual adherence to the rules falters when the trio realizes they cannot proceed without the crucial ingredient, which can only be found in the restricted section. They can't afford to wait for a teacher to give them permission, and so Hermione comes up with a plan. She decides to forge a note from Professor Lockhart, their defense against the dark arts teacher. Hermione, ever the academic, is skilled in many forms of magic, but this is a different form of mastery altogether, an art in deception. In the book, it is mentioned that Hermione forged the note from Lockhart with ease, manipulating the situation to her advantage. As Harry and Ron prepare to go along with her plan, Hermione writes a note that pretends to be an official permission slip from the professor. The trio knows full well that the only person who would have the authority to allow them access to the restricted section is Lockhart, and they also know that the professor is often too self-absorbed and incompetent to check his own correspondence. It's a classic case of exploiting someone's ego and laziness for personal gain. "It'll be all right," Hermione says confidently. "He won't even notice." And she was right, for when Lockhart signs the forged note without reading it, he unwittingly becomes an accomplice to the trio as rule-breaking, albeit unknowingly. The act of forging a document, even in the magical world, is a serious offence. In the Muggle world, forging a signature is grounds for dismissal from school, legal action, and even criminal charges. In the magical world, it might seem like a small infraction, considering the many more dangerous things students engage in. Yet, the act itself carries with it a weight of immorality that is hard to ignore. The trio, however, does not seem to see the severity of their actions. To them, it is simply another hurdle in their quest for the truth, a necessary step in uncovering the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets. They justify their actions by their noble intentions, but they fail to see the potential consequences. The act of forging Lockhart's signature is, at its core, a violation of trust. It exposes the dark side of Hermione's otherwise perfect character. Hermione is known for her incredible intellect, her ability to always follow the rules, and her strict moral compass, but this moment shows a more rebellious side of her, a side that is willing to push boundaries when the situation calls for it. In this case, she justifies the act by the end goal, saving the school and her friends. However, this also raises an important question. If Hermione, the embodiment of good intentions, can justify breaking such a fundamental rule, what does that say about the morality of the trio as a whole? In their quest to brew the polyjuice potion, the trio does not hesitate to break yet another important rule. They sneak into the bathroom to brew the potion, hide from the professors, and, worst of all, they take part in a practice that could endanger their health and their future at Hogwarts. The potion itself is extremely complicated and the ingredients dangerous if used incorrectly. Yet they proceed with it in the hope that they will be able to gain information that could stop the attacks in the school. Again, the end justifies the means for them. This becomes a recurring theme in the series. The trio will break rules, lie and deceive in order to do what they believe is right. What is perhaps most telling about this particular incident is the involvement of Professor Lockhart, whose signature is forged. Lockhart is a bumbling fool who does not realize that he is being taken advantage of by a group of 12-year-olds. His character is one of self-obsession, and he is so enamored with his own fame that he cannot be bothered to pay attention to the details of his job. His ineptitude as a teacher and his lack of attention to his responsibilities make him the perfect target for Hermione's deception. Yet in the larger context it raises an uncomfortable point. about the adult figures in the series. Hogwarts is filled with authority figures who, while well-meaning, often fail to notice or prevent the misdeeds of their students. This is not the first time in the series that the trio exploits the weaknesses of adults, nor is it the last. The forgery is just one example of how the trio manipulates the system for their benefit. Throughout their years at Hogwarts, they continue to bend the rules to their will, often using their intelligence and their resourcefulness to navigate situations that would leave most students in trouble. The fact that they rarely face consequences for their actions highlights an interesting aspect of the magical world. The rules, though clearly stated, often seem to be more like suggestions than enforceable laws. There are many instances throughout the series where students break the rules and face no real punishment. But in the case of the Polyjuice potion, the trio's success in breaching the rules only serves to further their cause, strengthening their bond and sense of justice in their young minds. The forgery of the permission slip, while a minor act of rebellion in the grand scheme of things, symbolizes a deeper truth about the trio. Their willingness to manipulate the system and defy authority becomes a crucial part of their characters as the series progresses. They learn that sometimes the rules are not enough to protect what is truly important. In many ways, the Golden Trio's actions here foreshadow the larger battles they will face in the future, battles against a dark force that operates in the shadows, bending the rules and forging its own path to power. Though Harry, Ron, and Hermione may face little to no real consequences for this particular act of rule-breaking, it does reveal a deeper truth about their characters. They are willing to go to great lengths to do what they believe is right, even when it means breaking the rules. The forgery of Lockhart's signature is a small yet significant step in their journey, a step that ultimately sets them on a path where they will have to make even bigger decisions, where the consequences of their actions will carry much greater weight. Number 29. Secret use of legilimency. The concept of Harry Potter's adventures is filled with the thrill of mystery and bravery, yet beneath the surface there are moments where the boundaries between right and wrong blur. One of the most compelling instances of this lies in the use of legilimency, a powerful form of magic that allows one to read another's mind, a skill Harry never officially studied, but inadvertently mastered. Through his connection with Voldemort, Harry gained the ability to access the Dark Lord's thoughts, feelings, and plans. Rather than immediately report these insights to Dumbledore or even discuss them openly with his closest friends, Harry often kept this dangerous knowledge to himself, using it as a tool for his personal investigations. This subtle disregard for school rules and ethics serves as a fascinating aspect of Harry's character development and brings attention to the complexities of his journey. Throughout the series, Harry's ability to see into Voldemort's mind is a constant, unpredictable factor that neither he nor the wizarding world fully understands. Harry's connection with the Dark Lord is deeply intertwined with his scar, an unspoken bond that grows stronger as Voldemort regains power. From the very beginning, Harry's experience with these visions is troubling. They are not mere dreams, but vivid, terrifying glimpses into the mind of a dark, powerful figure. It's a situation that would make most people panic, yet Harry struggles to manage it on his own, never quite sure whether he should be more afraid of what Voldemort might do or of how he should respond to his own thoughts. This unfiltered access to the enemy's mind puts Harry in a morally grey area, especially as he makes choices about when and how to use this dangerous gift. One example of this occurs in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry experiences a vision of Voldemort in a meeting with his followers. Rather than immediately informing Dumbledore or the Ministry of Magic, Harry chooses to keep this vision to himself, instead deciding to investigate it further with the help of his friends. His secretive nature in this situation is not merely an attempt to gain information, but a reflection of his deepening need to understand Voldemort's actions on his own terms. While he does eventually come to the conclusion that his visions are crucial for understanding the Dark Lord's plans, the fact that he does not report his findings immediately reflects Harry's growing sense of autonomy, perhaps even a belief that he can solve the problem without adult interference. This behavior, however, demonstrates Harry's moral ambiguity. The ethical implications of legitimacy are not lost on him, though he is willing to overlook them when he feels the stakes are high. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Harry once again experiences the mind of Voldemort, he is confronted by another instance of unethical magic. He enters Voldemort's thoughts without permission, a form of mental intrusion that most would consider a gross violation of personal boundaries. However, instead of immediately acknowledging the gravity of this breach, Harry simply focuses on the information he can extract, convinced that it is necessary for the greater good. This sense of duty and urgency leads him to make decisions that would be deemed reckless by anyone else. By choosing not to inform Dumbledore or anyone else at Hogwarts, Harry demonstrates his inherent belief that he knows better. He thinks that if he can get a piece of the puzzle without asking for permission, he might be able to stop Voldemort before it's too late. Yet this decision comes with dire consequences. The more Harry uses this power without guidance, the more dangerous it becomes for him and those around him. The lack of control over the visions leads to a sense of growing paranoia, both for Harry and for the reader. There is always a lingering fear that Harry might not be able to separate himself from Voldemort's influence, and each new vision raises the stakes higher. In Harry's case, his use of legilimency is driven not by a desire for personal gain, but rather by a deep-rooted sense of responsibility to protect the wizarding world. He truly believes that by gaining access to Voldemort's mind, he can prevent further destruction. However, this raises the question, at what point does the need to defeat the enemy justify violating ethical boundaries? Harry's personal ethics are clouded by his sense of urgency, a dilemma that resonates throughout the series. What makes this situation even more complex is the fact that Harry's friends, especially Ron and Hermione, are largely unaware of his abilities. They know that something is off, but are unaware of the full extent of his connection with Voldemort. In many ways, Harry keeps his powers a secret from them, not because he does not trust them, but because he believes that they won't understand or, worse, try to stop him. The secrecy he maintains in his use of legilimency highlights Harry's growing isolation and the burden of his knowledge. He is fighting not just Voldemort, but the very nature of the magical world's rules, which are supposed to keep magic in check. And in his mind, the need to stop the Dark Lord outweighs any considerations about the rules he is breaking. This secrecy extends to the most pivotal moment of Harry, his use of legilimency, when he first learns about the prophecy. This prophecy, which details that Harry is the one destined to defeat Voldemort, is not something that Harry directly seeks, but rather something he stumbles upon through his connection to Voldemort. He doesn't even fully understand the significance of the prophecy at first, but the consequences of knowing about it are immense. Once again, instead of sharing this information, Harry uses it to fuel his personal investigation into Voldemort's mind, thus bypassing the more ethical and conventional routes for solving the problem. By hiding the truth from Dumbledore and his friends, Harry isolates himself in a way that makes his actions more unpredictable and dangerous. He is no longer just the boy who lived. He is the boy who can access the Dark Lord's thoughts and feels the weight of this power. What is particularly fascinating about Harry, Wyatt's secret use of legilimency, is the tension it creates in his relationship with Dumbledore. Dumbledore, who is aware of the connection between Harry and Voldemort, advises Harry to be cautious, yet Harry is increasingly unwilling to heed his mentor's warnings. In his mind, the ends justify the means, and the temptation to use the information from his visions becomes too great. This tension between Harry's self-assuredness and Dumbledore's caution symbolizes the internal conflict of a young person coming into their own power,
unsure of where the line between moral duty and personal choice lies. Despite the ethical implications of Harry's actions, he does not face the consequences one might expect from breaking such a significant rule. While other students, such as Draco Malfoy, face expulsion or punishment for less serious infractions, Harry's rule-breaking is never formally acknowledged. His use of legilimency, though dangerous, is excused by his actions in the war against Voldemort. This double standard is a recurring theme throughout the series. The characters we root for, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, often find themselves in situations where they break rules in the name of justice, yet they are rarely punished as a result. This speaks to a larger theme in the Harry Potter series, the ambiguity of justice, especially in times of war. In the end, Harry's use of legilimency is a tool, both a blessing and a curse. It is a power he uses for good, but it is one that blurs the lines between right and wrong. His ability to see into the mind of Voldemort is both a gift and a dangerous temptation that often leads him down a path of moral complexity. Harry's actions raise important questions about the role of ethics in wartime, about the limits of power, and about the consequences of using dark magic for what we believe to be the greater good. Through his journey, readers come to understand that the rules we live by are not always clear-cut, and that sometimes, in the face of great evil, we must all choose how far we are willing to go to fight it. Number 30. Aiding a fugitive prisoner. In the fifth book of the Harry Potter series, to quote 56, there is a moment that stands out as a direct violation of school rules, as well as the laws of the wizarding world. It is the moment when Harry, Hermione, and Ron become entangled in a situation where they knowingly assist an escaped convict, Sirius Black, who is on the run from the authorities. This is no ordinary act of rebellion. It is a case where the trio's friendship, loyalty, and sense of justice drive them to break the rules and take significant risks to protect a person they believe to be innocent despite his criminal past. Sirius Black, once thought to be a dangerous mass murderer, had escaped from Azkaban, the infamous wizarding prison, and found his way to Hogwarts. The events that unfold demonstrate how, in the heat of the moment, even the most well-meaning of students can make choices that place them in direct opposition to the law. The series had long portrayed the magical world as one of strict order, with institutions like the Ministry of Magic and Hogwarts itself maintaining high standards of discipline.
The rules were there to protect, guide, and control the lives of witches and wizards, whether in the classroom or in the broader wizarding society. However, the case of Sirius Black posed a unique challenge to these rules. He was, after all, believed to be guilty of betraying Harry's parents to Lord Voldemort, an act that resulted in their deaths and his own subsequent imprisonment in Azkaban. The fear that he might escape again and seek vengeance had led to a fearsome reputation, and Harry's deep-seated belief that Sirius had been wrongfully convicted shifted the balance between right and wrong in his mind. At first, Harry was unaware of Sirius's true innocence. In fact, he, along with most of the wizarding world, had grown up believing that Sirius Black had been the one to betray his parents. This belief was shattered when he learned from Hagrid, and later from Sirius himself, that it was, in fact, Peter Pettigrew, not Sirius, who had betrayed the Potters. The revelation hit Harry hard, and in the wake of it, he felt compelled to act, to make things right. However, this was no easy task. Sirius had escaped from Azkaban, and he was now a fugitive. The fact that he had managed to evade capture by the Ministry of Magic for so long only added to the gravity of the situation. This was not a simple case of helping a friend. It was a situation that demanded secrecy, deception, and above all, an immense amount of trust. As the trio discovered more about the truth of Sirius's innocence, they found themselves pulled into a web of secrecy. The rules that govern their lives at Hogwarts and the laws of the wizarding world clearly dictated that they should turn Sirius in immediately. After all, helping a fugitive was a serious crime. But instead they chose to protect him, to keep his location a secret, and to continue communicating with him through the use of enchanted mirrors. These mirrors allowed them to stay in touch with Sirius without arousing suspicion, enabling them to carry out their plan under the radar. The fact that they were breaking the law in doing so never truly fazed them. Their primary concern was not the rules, but the safety of their friend. The idea of Sirius being wrongly convicted, imprisoned, and hunted by the Ministry was far more urgent than the fear of punishment they might face for their actions. Harry, Hermione, and Ron's decision to help Sirius, however, was not without its consequences. As they navigated the challenges of keeping him hidden, they often found themselves breaking or bending school rules. The trio met secretly to discuss their plans, sometimes sneaking around Hogwarts and using the invisibility cloak to move undetected through the castle. The secrecy and danger that surrounded them were only heightened by the knowledge that they were acting against the Ministry of Magic, which was a powerful institution within the wizarding world. Even more dangerous, of course, was the fact that they were aiding a fugitive who had been accused of a heinous crime. Their actions could, in theory, lead to their expulsion from Hogwarts, or worse, criminal charges. But this was where the deeper moral dilemma began to emerge. The line between right and wrong blurred in this instance, as the trio's loyalty to their friend overshadowed their fear of punishment. They viewed Sirius as a hero, as someone who had been wrongfully imprisoned, and they could not bear the idea of turning him over to the Ministry only to have him suffer further. This was the core of the conflict. They were breaking the law to protect someone they believed to be innocent. In the wizarding world, this kind of rebellion was a serious offense. Not only were they helping a fugitive escape justice, but they were also endangering themselves by getting involved in a situation that could have easily gone terribly wrong. The role of Hermione Granger in all this is particularly interesting. As the most academically driven and law-abiding member of the group, Hermione initially struggled with the idea of helping Sirius. She was always the first to remind Harry and Ron of the importance of following the rules, and the risks of their actions weighed heavily on her. However, despite her reservations, she too recognized the larger issue at play, that Sirius was not the criminal everyone believed him to be. Over time, she became as determined as Harry and Ron to protect him, to keep him safe, and to help clear his name. This shift in Hermione's character development is crucial, as it showcases her ability to prioritize justice and friendship over strict adherence to the rules. For Hermione, the decision to help Sirius was a moral one, rooted in the belief that doing the right thing sometimes meant breaking the law. Ron Weasley, as the ever-loyal friend, was quick to follow Harry's lead. Although Ron was not as intellectually inclined as Hermione, he was always willing to stand by his friends no matter the consequences. His loyalty to Harry and his unwavering belief in the goodness of Sirius drove him to act without hesitation. Ron's decision to join the plan was not out of any desire for adventure or rebellion, but out of a sense of duty to help his friend. It was clear that in Ron's eyes, helping Sirius was the right thing to do, even if it meant defying authority. Throughout all of this, the trio, these actions were guided by a deep sense of loyalty and moral responsibility. They didn't view themselves as criminals or rebels. They saw themselves as protectors of the truth and the innocent. The lines between right and wrong became less clear-cut, and the trio was forced to make decisions based on their own sense of justice, not the laws laid down by the Ministry of Magic. The situation highlights a central theme of the series, the importance of questioning authority when it is in the wrong, and standing up for what you believe to be right, even when it means breaking the rules. In this case, their decision to help Sirius Black was not only an act of defiance, but also a demonstration of their commitment to justice, friendship, and loyalty. Eventually, their actions led to the revelation of the true events surrounding the betrayal of the Potters, and Sirius' innocence was proven. The Ministry, although reluctant to accept it, had no choice but to acknowledge that Sirius had been unjustly imprisoned. However, this resolution came at a great cost. The trio's involvement in helping Sirius escape had led them into dangerous territory, and they had to rely on their wits and courage to navigate the complex world of wizarding law. In the end, their actions were not only justified by the truth, but also by their unwavering belief in what was right. In this way, the story of Sirius Black's escape and the trio's involvement in it serves as a reminder that sometimes the rules of society must be challenged in order to protect the innocent and uphold the greater good. The Zoloto trio's actions in this case may have been illegal, but they were motivated by a deep sense of justice, loyalty, and the desire to right a wrong. Their decision to help a fugitive, despite the risks involved, ultimately proved that doing the right thing is not always about following the law. It's about doing what is morally right, even in the face of great danger.